Hello and welcome to another episode of The Fifth Floor, a podcast about creativity, art, and photography. My name is Athina and I am your host. So, as a podcast about creativity that is committed to being true to itself, we need to talk about fear. We have touched on this briefly before, especially back in episode 4, when we talked about why it is so difficult to call ourselves artists. But I think fear deserves its own space, not just to list all the fears that come with being creative, but to really explore how we think about fear, how we relate to it, and how we might move forward with fear instead of waiting for it to disappear. So today, we're talking about fear and creativity, but really, we're focusing on how we show up with that fear. So, before we get too deep, let's quickly call out some ways fear sneaks in and blocks us from creating. So we have fear of failing, of being judged, of rejection, of the unknown, even fear of success. There is also fear of not being original, feeling inadequate, losing control, or just wasting time. Basically, fear has got a whole toolkit for messing with us. Sounds familiar? Yeah. Me too. Okay, someone could say that I have read quite a few books around creativity, and obviously most, if not all of them, talk about fear in some way. But I will share the two approaches that I found closer to how I try to approach fear around creativity. So the first one is Elizabeth Gilbert's approach, and the way she describes it in her book called Big Magic. So she says, your fear will always be triggered by your creativity because creativity asks you to enter into realms of uncertain outcome, and fear hates uncertain outcome. And then she goes on and says, fear is like a backseat passenger on a road trip. You can't kick it out of the car, but you also don't let it drive or even touch the radio. Spot on, I think. So what she's trying to say is that fear is something normal, natural. It is not a problem to solve. It is a companion that comes with any creative endeavor. Fear will show up when you're doing something new, bold, vulnerable, or unknown, because fear's job is to protect you from risk. You have to think creativity and fear like conjoined twins. You can't have one without the other. In other words, you don't have to fight or overcome fear. You just have to coexist with it. Acknowledge its presence, but set clear boundaries. It has to be obvious that fear doesn't get to make any decisions or dictate your choices. Gilbert imagines talking to fear like this. Dear fear, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip. I know you're coming because you always do. That's fine. You can come, but you don't get to touch the steering wheel, the map, or the snacks. You don't even get to suggest directions. I don't know about you, but that makes so much sense to my brain. So it is not about being fearless, it is about creating even when you are afraid. And then the second one is Rainer Maria Rilke's approach, from his letters to a young poet. So he says, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is in its deepest essence something helpless that wants our love. This quote speaks directly to fear, especially creating or existential fear. Rilke suggests that what we perceive as threatening dragons might actually be vulnerable parts of ourselves or our lives, princesses, asking for compassion and courage. In this metaphor, dragons represent our fears, the big, scary, overwhelming parts of life or ourselves that we instinctively avoid. This could be fear of failure, of rejection, of not being enough, of the unknown, of change, or vulnerability. These fears often appear threatening, and our first reaction is to defend ourselves, run, or shut down. What Rilke does is to invite us to consider that these dragons might actually be princesses, symbols of beauty, potential, or something sacred within us, disguised as monsters. The fear is not a signal to run, but an invitation to respond with courage and love. What frightens us most may be where our deepest truth, calling, or creativity lives. Something helpless that wants our love. This line reframes fear not as an enemy, but as a part of ourselves that is scared, uncertain, or unhealed. Something that needs understanding rather than avoidance. When we meet fear with beauty and courage, we transform it. We give ourselves permission to grow. So instead of avoiding the fear, Rilke suggests, approach it, love it, let it transform you. So bottom line, both Rilke and Gilbert treat fear not as an enemy, but as a misunderstood part of ourselves. Rilke sees fear as a hidden longing or invitation, the dragon is a princess, and Gilbert sees fear as a nervous but constant passenger of the creative journey, present but not in charge. Personally, my dragon usually shows up with the question, who cares? Who cares about art and creativity? Who cares about what you will make? Why do you bother? Which kind of summarizes all fears mentioned at the beginning of this episode. So what I am trying to do is to stop and try to remember why I do bother. Well, the thing is that I care about art and creativity, and if anything I have to say will help unlock something in someone else, then that is a great success. I also feel that we all need to understand that we're all creative. And then I just keep going. So I guess what I am trying to say is that instead of giving fear the driver's seat or avoiding our dragons, we need to recognize them, name them, acknowledge that they are there and that they will continue to be, talk to them, love them, and let them be an ally instead of the enemy. Fear is part of the process. It arrives every time you stand on the edge of something meaningful, a blank page, a canvas, a new idea, a truth you're brave enough to express. You might feel the dragons Rilke spoke of, looming large. You might hear fears chatter in the backseat like Gilbert described. But hear this, your creativity matters, your voice matters, your art has a place in this world. So, notice, acknowledge, create anyway. And if you need some more reading for home around creativity, some of my favorites are The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, and The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. But before you go, and if this has helped you in any way, please send it to one friend who needs to hear this today. And never forget in your life that we have a new podcast every Wednesday. To visit fifthfloor.me and subscribe to our newsletter to get updates. Follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and share if you liked and leave a review. If you're listening via YouTube, please subscribe and share any topics you wish us to discuss or to expand on more. Okay, bye for now and thank you for being here. See you on the next one.